So welcome, welcome. If you are new today, my name is Andrea Estrella, and I will pass it on to my colleagues in just a bit. But welcome to this MEL 360 in Practice webinar. While we call it a webinar, it's really a more hands-on, practical workshop type of session. So we do encourage your active participation. We will be having breakout groups and interactive activities. So we hope that everyone came with a lot of energy. But I will pass it on to my colleagues to introduce themselves really quickly. So Sassy, if you
Yeah,
don't mind.
hi everyone. I'm Zazie. Been working on this project for a while. I'm based in Copenhagen and I'm an evaluator working with lots of people working on systems transformation. I'll hand over to Bianca.
Hi everyone, I'm Bianca. I'm based in Seattle, originally from Panama, and I do monitoring and evaluation in the Food Systems Global team, and also I'm part of this project. Over to Federica.
Thank you, Bianca. Hello, everyone. Great to see, as always, many of you joining us and very active already in the chat. I'm Federica, based in Spain, originally from Italy. I work as community consultant, and I joined last year this project, and I've been working also in the past with the food systems team, always in a community of practice. Over to you, Andrea.
Thank you so much, Fede. And so, as Fede asked, please drop your introductions in the chat, and if you want to share a word or an emoji about how you are arriving today, that would be wonderful. Can someone in my team let me know if you can see my screen? Okay.
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Yes. Amazing. Okay, perfect. Great. So again, welcome everyone. So over these 4 sessions, and we are in the third session today, we are exploring how to make monitoring, evaluation, and learning go past just measurement to really tackle how to track systems change. So we are in module 3. We have been exploring the orientation lens. We started looking at the spiral, and today we are going to continue with the spiral, and then we'll get to practice with some tools like domains of change and the leverage points. And importantly, the fourth module, we will be having an interactive Ask Me Anything. And we will share a couple of examples from practitioners in the field. So at the end of this webinar, we will be asking you to drop your questions, and that will help us inform the fourth session. So welcome, and we hope that you also find space to connect with peers and share what's working in your own practice, and also co-creating what system smell looks like in practice. This is a wonderful audience, and I know that a lot of you are already experimenting with these approaches. So let's also take this opportunity to learn from each other. But now I will pass it on to my colleague Federica for some quick community guidelines for the ones that are new on this session.
Thank you, Andrea. And as you are seeing, we are recording this session. We will do so also for the next one, and you will always receive all the resources related to the series, including the recording. If you would prefer to not appear in the recording while sharing any questions or comments verbally, please turn off your camera. Otherwise, we really encourage you to turn on your camera during the main room activities as well as the group ones. Also, please feel free to share any ideas, comments, or questions in the chat, or please raise your hand and unmute yourself to raise any idea, raise any questions or idea. And please, we really recommend to be respectful while sharing any feedback. As you know, we will have breakout room activities. In the case you would like to have a breakout room in a non-English room, for instance, you would like to have to join a breakout room activity in Spanish, you can go to the list of participants and find your name, click on the three dots and click on rename yourself, as I am doing right now. And for instance, add, in my case, Spanish as an option. We really encourage you to do it in the next 5-10 minutes, so I will be able to accommodate you in your preferred language breakout room. Over to you, Andrea.
Thank you so much, Fede. And we really try to do our best to accommodate the different preferences. And so let's start diving into this module, because as usual, we have a lot to cover, and we are taking in your feedback, and we recognize the importance of having the space to have this conversation. So we are going to be having some breakout group activities as well, with a bit more time than in previous sessions. So very quickly, what are we going to be doing today? We will do a brief recap of what we've seen in Module 2, and we'll invite a few reflections around the homework, especially around the domains of change and the early signals that you identified in your homework if you completed your homework. And then we'll move on to a participatory exercise to deepen the thinking on domains of change and signals. And then we will walk you through the spiral using the Kenya case study. And finally, last session, we asked you which how-to sheets you would prefer for us to walk through in this session. And so the two winners were the systems-informed theory of change, and then the identification of leverage points. Today, we are going to talk about leverage points because we find that it is important that leverage points guide the intervention design and activities. And as you know, that's critical for your systems-informed theory of change. So we will be presenting leverage points today. We'll have an exercise around that so that hopefully you'll get to experiment a bit around how to identify leverage points. And then on the next session, we will be doing a deeper dive on the systems-informed theory of change. So we hope you join us for that one as well. With that, let me go into a very quick recap of what we've seen so far. And okay, so we are basically done looking at the orientation lens. And just as a reminder, the orientation lens is like your starting compass. So you start by identifying your strategic intent, which is your long-term purpose of change, of transformation. We like to say that it's like a compass bearing for your journey. You define your system boundaries, define the area of the system where you will focus your intervention. We like to say that it's like charting the region of the map. And then you locate your role, your agency, through the spheres of control, influence, and interest. And you identify the kinds of shifts that matter through the domains of change. So as we said last time, orientation isn't fixed. As you are learning, your strategic intent becomes sharper, your boundaries can shift, your spheres may expand or contract, and the domains you focus on may change and evolve as well. So we like to say that it is a living entry point. It's not a checklist that you need to complete when you're planning or designing or even implementing your activities. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat, and then we will do our best to answer them. Okay. But I just wanted to do again a very quick reminder of the domains of change that we covered in the last session. So I will not go too deep into those. But just to say that these are the 6 areas where we say the transformation tends to unfold in real systems. And again, this comes from the literature, and you have already reflected on which domains of change matter most to your strategic intent in your own projects, right? In your homework. But a very quick reminder, it helps us look beyond outputs to the deeper shifts that actually signal whether a system is moving, and it can be behaviors, relationships, institutions, mindsets, power, resource flows. And why does this matter for your work? So it helps us spot connections early where progress in one area might support or block progress in another. It helps us reveal the underlying dynamics that we need to be paying attention to, not just what we are delivering. And it helps you design and learn with complexity in mind. So you've explored this in your homework, identifying which domains matter, what meaningful change would look like, and what early signals you might be seeing. We will be building on that exercise today. But before we move on, as my colleague Fede already dropped on the chat, does anyone want to share an insight from doing that reflection? Anything that surprised you or that might have become clearer when you mapped your domains of change and your signals and your early signals of change?
If you do, please just speak up and let us know.
It's Sylvia here. I think it's more a reflection that I had. So I'm trying to think if I want to use this methodology, how like in a real case scenario, of course, and in multiple stakeholder environment. This can be quite lengthy as an exercise. Can you share how, if you've seen it in a specific context, how essentially what I'm seeing is that this is super useful, but I would struggle to see it like happening in a multi-stakeholder environment, because it can go to so many layers. Behaviors can even go to, I don't know, choice of all sorts. So I think it was very useful for me to kind of from my own perspective, but if I have, and I could see it even from my team, if we did it just internally, but would you use this methodology and this part especially with other stakeholders that can be, in my case, other UN agencies we're working with, or I don't know, the government, or at national and subnational level. Is more a reflection than really something that struck me from the exercise itself only. Over. I hope I was clear.
Absolutely. Does anyone want to take that question or provide a reflection around that?
Andrea,
Then
you're asking everyone in the call, not just us.
everyone on the call,
Yeah.
or also on our team, or otherwise I'll jump in. But I just wanted to give the opportunity to see if anyone wanted to chime in.
I can share something, but you go ahead.
No, go ahead first.
No, go on.
Go.
So just my experience using it in a UN context, so particularly with the introduction of the new portfolio approach. So this is a critical part of the work that they're doing. One thing to bear in mind, and certainly something that they do, is they never see it as something they need to have perfect on the first go, right? So often what happens is as they're engaging with stakeholders and they're doing their initial kind of take on what's the context in which we're working, what do we all individually know already about the context, they use this tool to actually map and capture some of those reflections, right? So that are shared. And then there's a bit of well, this is where we're at the moment, and it's something that they would revisit over and over again, right? Through the process, through the design process, but also as they're doing the work later. So I don't know if that answers fully your question, but I think just to kind of remember that, of course, if you were to do this like an academic exercise, it's a lot of work, right? But what you're trying to do actually by using this tool is to see the system and to have a shared way of seeing the system and capturing that information. So I think it's about taking it a little bit more lightly than you would if you were doing like a full evaluation on something, for example, where you'd look for really high rigor. That rigor is built over time.
Thank you so much, Sassy. I won't take a lot of time on this. But just to say that the way we've conducted it as well is in different sort of layers where you can start doing it internally with the team. And then, as Sassy said, you can have a lighter layer with external stakeholders. And we are developing facilitation sheets that might be helpful with this because they help give ideas about how to prioritize, and how to make this a little bit quicker and leaner. So those will be available for you as well. But I want to give space for participants. So first Maria, and then Mary Sue, and then we can continue. So Maria, if you want to chime in.
Yes, hi everyone. Thanks, Andrea. My name is Maria from Lebanon. So a couple of things really quickly. First of all, just a kind of a reflection to build on what Zazie just mentioned. So yes, it is not an academic exercise, or maybe the same level of rigor is not expected, but at the same time, I wonder how can we strike the right balance between the rigor of academia and just doing things totally haphazardly. So, I saw, because I missed the last session, but I watched the recording and read the Q&A from the chat. There was a point in the chat about, oh, choose 2 or 3 domains of change, and then, these are entry points, start where you can. But like personally, I worry that, how do I know these 2 or 3 domains of change working together are actually going to make a dent into this issue? Like, how do I know I've got the right combination here? Why not these other 2 domains of change? So that just making sure that we're really anchoring our work in the evidence and also what we see and know, on the ground. That's one thing. And then just a question about this system versus, let's say, mainstreaming gender, conflict sensitivity, do no harm, things like that into program design. So I see some elements of those. Of course, this is way more maybe elaborate, comprehensive, and structured, but there are elements of things that we already do at a program level. So I'm wondering, how do we kind of overlay that onto this system here? It gets a bit confusing.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Maria. I can take your first question just very briefly, and then I'll pass it on to my colleagues for the second one. But in terms of the domains of change, you are absolutely correct that we do encourage this initial thinking. Um, we did not have time to walk you through the whole process that we developed because prior, to the domains of change in identification, and even after that, we do encourage teams to ground it in systems mapping, for instance, and other tools that help you get a better understanding of the system. And importantly, this is not a one-off exercise. You might, shift or add domains of change or even remove some as you are exploring more the system and as you move forward with your intervention. So just to say that this is not a one-off exercise, and it's just in our experience, the just thinking about domains of change, and how your initiative might be tackling those is extremely powerful, and it helps us shift away from just delivering outputs and results, right? So again, it's how do we integrate these additional layers without, as Azi said, having to be perfect, and get it right on the first go, but just experimenting with it and, getting stronger as we go. But any comments, Zazie or the team on the second question about integrating frameworks?
I mean, it's a really good point. And so one of the things in the MEL 360, which we're not touching on here again, because again, we can't cover everything, is that we do have principles which really lean into inclusivity and taking on different perspectives. And I think the one of the challenges that we have in any of this work is bringing those frameworks together and leveraging them, right? So we get different perspectives. And what we're trying to do here is it is an additional kind of take, but it's trying to give you a systems view on the work, right? So it's not saying drop everything else. It's when you're using the systems view, how do your other frameworks what do they tell you about the system again, right? And sometimes there might be things that actually sit next to each other that aren't fully coherent yet. And other times you might actually see something you hadn't seen before, right? Through the system framework about the other lenses that you're taking to your work. But I think we have to be really careful here that we don't have perfect answers for everything. So when you're doing this kind of systems work, there's an assumption that we can't really fully know the system, right? And that it takes a system to shift a system. So here, this is really about helping you to see your intervention, the work you're doing through a systems lens. So that you can have a better understanding of its fits and its potential. It doesn't mean drop the other frameworks at all, right? It's actually about learning across those. But it's a really good, challenging question. And I feel like we don't have time to give it full justice here, but maybe something we can pick up. Thank you. Mary Sue.
Mary Sue?
Sorry, yep, sorry. I just wanted to comment on this last point. I was going to say something else, but this is so important. Somebody said in the first session that rigor is about rigorous engagement. And honest to gosh, all of us male colleagues are people who want really clear things, stuff to measure, and it's uncomfortable working with these domains of change is really uncomfortable because you have to keep your eye on all of this stuff as it moves forward because you don't know where change is actually going to emerge. And so it's rigorous engagement with the understanding of each one of those domains of change, rigorous engagement with different perspectives and different allies and different voices that are gathered around the table. It is not easy. That's not to say that we shouldn't use those other frameworks, as everyone has already said. But I just want to say that it's going to be uncomfortable. What could we do? We just have to get used to that.
This is a wonderful reflection, Mary Sue, and we will keep that. We will keep that. Let's just get comfortable with being uncomfortable, right? But that takes us to the next bit of content that we want to be reflecting on, and then we can move on to a participatory exercise. So you have already experimented with identifying early signals of change for your initially prioritized domains of change. So we will do just a quick recap of how we are understanding signals of change. So we all have sort of standardized knowledge and concepts here. When we talk about signals of change, we are talking about those early hints that something in the system might be starting to shift. Very importantly, these are not indicators, they are not proof, they're not hard evidence, but instead they are lightweight, qualitative, contextual clues. So some people say that it's like the system is whispering you that change might be starting. So signals help teams notice subtle, nonlinear shifts that are typical of the complex systems that we work with. And they help us adapt earlier instead of waiting for formal indicators to take shape, make invisible dynamics visible around coordination, trust, mindset shifts, and they help create a shared learning across partners. I've seen in my experience as an evaluator that many projects actually do informally keep track, for instance, about how relationships are building, for instance, between ministries that weren't talking to each other before and now they are starting to meet. And that would be a good example of a signal of change, of, again, a clue and or a whisper that is not necessarily showing up in indicators, but that is really telling you that something is taking shape, that something is starting to shift in your system. So again, just a couple of other examples of small but meaningful changes that we could identify if you have new voices appearing in your multi-stakeholder platforms, if you see any shifts in narratives or in language around the way that people refer to certain topics, small changes in trust or coordination. Importantly, these early signals of change don't always have to be positive. They can also signal resistance or pushback, and that can be a sign that something is being disrupted. And that can be, for example, increased disagreements among partners. It could be gatekeepers reasserting control, or it could be a powerful actor slowing down a new idea. And importantly, we need to know that resistance is not failure. It means that something is important is being touched. So, typically when power, norms, or relationships begin to shift even slightly, the system tends to react. And noticing that pushback really helps you understand where that change is landing and how you might need to engage. Um, so when we cover this topic, people ask us, how do we know where to look? How do we identify these early signals of change? Um, a more straightforward way to do it is to go back to your domains of change to try to map them. Um, so, for instance, if your domain is relationships, your early signals of change might include new alliances, more open communication, or resistance from groups who might feel threatened. If your domain is power, signals might include new actors influencing decisions, marginalized voices speaking up, among others. And so, just a key takeaway is that signals are early clues. They are not judgments, they're not indicators, and they help you learn in real time as the system evolves before your outputs or outcomes are visible. And we do have a specific how-to sheet on identifying signals of change, and also UNDP has a dedicated tool to identify early signals of change that they have been rolling out in multiple portfolios. So we would be happy to share those tools with you as well. And now it's time to get together and think about this. So just to briefly explain what this exercise will be about, on the last session, you identify the priority domains of change that would need to shift for Kenya's strategic intent to become real. And in your homework, you link this to your own project. So now what we are going to do in groups is to take the Kenya domains of change. There will be a brief moment of alignment as groups align on the 2 or 3 domains of change that you believe are most important to tackle Kenya's strategic intent. And then we are going to ask you that for each priority domain of change, you discuss what would meaningful change or transformative change look like in this project. And there's a couple prompts here around what would people be doing differently, what would feel different in relationships, decisions, practices, etc. And then we are asking you to identify early signals of change for each domain, thinking about what observable signs might tell you that change might be beginning. And here are some prompts to guide your discussion. We will not be using Miro this time. We just encourage you to discuss. If someone can take notes and be prepared to share these elements out in terms of the priority domains of change, one meaningful change insight, and one early signal, that would be wonderful. But mainly, we want to encourage discussion and sort of building this muscle around the identification, prioritization, thinking about what meaningful change looks like and what an early signal of change might look like in this specific context, assuming obviously that this is an oversimplified version of what you would do in the field with your projects. Okay, so we are going to be dividing you into groups similar to the last sessions. For this module, you will be keeping the same group in the subsequent exercise. So get to know each other, take a couple minutes to introduce yourselves, and then please dive in on this exercise. And that's it. Fede, if you want, do you want to say anything about the breakout groups, or are we all ready to go? And you will have 15 minutes for this discussion before I forget, and then we'll come back and have a 5-minute plenary conversation.
Thanks, Andrea. Just a heads up that I shared in the chat the slides that Andrea is sharing. I shared a link with all helpful slides, so you can look at them. No stress to look around. And yeah, I'm opening the rooms. Thanks.
Everyone. I think we're maybe all, not all of us are back yet. So just as we're waiting for everyone else to join, it'd be great to hear any reflections on that activity. The last group I was in just said, we need 4 hours, not 20 minutes, which fully appreciate that is absolutely true. But just in terms of your engagement with this exercise, was there anything that surprised you? Did anything really click for you, or or just sharing your experience of doing the shared thinking that you did in groups? Would anyone like to share some reflections before we move on? Yes, go
Something
for it.
that I would. So I had a individual in my group named Fafula who like casually mentioned something that is gonna stay with me my whole life. He said that hey, when change happens, when people have a mindset change, right, and then they're able to then create that framework of change and then implement that framework. And I quite literally thought that he could write a book on this because I feel like he has very much summarized what change has to be. So going forward, I will very much be think. I know it doesn't really directly answer the question, but I was like, damn, I'm learning so much. So thank you, Bafula, wherever wherever you are at this point. That's all.
Amazing. And I think actually we'll get onto some of that when we come to talking about the leverage points. But yeah, mindsets, I mean, it's often if you can change mindsets, it's at the bottom of the iceberg and it means that you can really shift the system. Of course, depends what systems and whose mindsets, but absolutely. Any other reflections that people would like to share? Otherwise, we can keep moving.
Well, I guess very quickly, and this comes from something actually you said, is the concept of system natives, and it might be, common for, kind of M&E experts, but I'm not. So to me, it is a very good summary of what we should be looking at, and even to detect if the change is happening, there at system natives level. Over.
Brilliant, thank you. And just the point on that is that those that are in the system can often tell us most about the system, and particularly those that are disadvantaged by the system. And that's why throughout the MEL 360, we really encourage participatory and inclusive approaches. Opio.
Yes, thank you so much. It's my first session of the MEL 360, but I'm excited because it's so insightful. And for the group discussion, I met a friend. It's called Florian from Switzerland. Unfortunately, we are all first timers, so I tried to capture something from here, linking the domain of change and signals of change to the Kenya dryland situation. When you look at the dryland situation in Kenya and you look at the land use type there, one of the biggest domains of change there should be mindset, because this is a dry land and the predominant economic activity there is pastoralism. And pastoralism directly have very negative impact on the land use, considering it's dry. So it's quite going to be making the situation worse. That is one mindset that needs to be shifted. It's linked to their culture. So pastoralism should be replaced with a sustainable land use system, which I think I will talk about later. Then one of the things there is resource flows. When you look at, reclaiming a land as degraded as the Kenya drylands is a very costly intervention. So even if uh, there is willingness, if there is no resources in terms of human resource, I mean the brains necessary and the technologies required to put this together, then it's going to be quite challenging because yeah. So and then the institutions, all this work cannot be done with very effective and institutions. So
Yeah.
once you have established institutions which are accountable and very how do you say accountable, transparent, all this can be put together. Then
Yeah.
so
So
describing the mindsets, like I told you, what I'm seeing there is instead of the pastoralism, if technologies like drip irrigation, which
yeah.
have been experimented elsewhere, it has succeeded in Israel and elsewhere. And if actually Israel's situation is worse than the one for Kenya, so drip
Mm.
irrigation, if
So
it's yes,
Opio, you're redesigning
mm.
it for us.
Sorry,
You're redesigning the intervention, which is great, which is really good.
yeah,
But just to remember, like really here what we were saying is, if if the what would you be looking at in for that particular project in terms of like early signs, right? That the system, so the space within which the intervention is being delivered is starting to shift in some way. But like lots of knowledge and experience from you there, so really helpful to have that perspective as well. But what I might do is I'll hand over to my colleague Andrea, because otherwise we're not going to finish on time. So we need
okay,
to
okay,
keep moving.
thank you,
But thank you.
yeah,
Thanks.
yeah.
No, this has been a fantastic conversation. Again, we have so much to talk about, but I think we're going to do just a slight readjustment to what we were planning for today, just so we have time to continue these conversations, okay? So we do need to go through the spiral, but what I'm thinking right now is that we could leave that for next week because it will not take that much time. And instead, we can move to discussing leverage points because this is something that we recommend that is utilized when you are conceptualizing and working on your systems informed theories of change. How do people feel about this? Give me a reaction. Yes? Okay. Wonderful. Perfect. And we will this is just such a rich group of people. So we very much appreciate the very rich conversations. Okay, so first we want to know how familiar you are with leverage points, okay? Because that will guide the level of depth that I will go into when we discuss this. So please go into the Mentimeter. You can either use the QR code or put type in the website name and use this code. And then the answers will start popping up, and I will pass it on to my colleague Bianca to guide us through that. And any tech support, please my colleague Fede is here and she knows everything about tech. So any support that you need, please just send us a note or speak up.
Thank you, Andrea. I'm going to share my screen right now to start seeing the results of how familiar you are with leverage points. So we have several colleagues already joining, around 23, and we see that people have heard about the term but cannot explain it very well, and some people kind of know it. So they are familiar with the term somehow, but for sure we're gonna learn more about this right now in the coming minutes. So that's very nice and to hear. So over to you, Andrea, so we can move forward.
Thank you, Bianca. Great. Perfect. Okay. Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much for letting us know how familiar you are with leverage points. I'm not going to go in depth on this graph, but just to show you that some people might have seen this. This is Donella Meadows' seminal work around leverage points. So the only thing that I want to highlight here is that leverage points, when we talk about them, we see them on a spectrum. From smaller adjustments that are more about the physical, the more visible shifts that we encourage in the system, to the deeper shifts around structures, mindsets, and power. So let's go through this, but just keep this in mind as we go through the content. So what are leverage points? And the definition that we're using, and some of you already said that you're familiar with, is that leverage points are these places in the system where a small, well-placed shift can trigger a much larger change. And it's really important when we mention that it's a small, well-placed, as in it has to be very targeted. And it does help us move from seeing the system, which we've done through domains of change, to acting strategically within the system. So how do we get from what needs to shift to how do we actually shift this? And this is what leverage points help you with. So you can think of them on 3 levels, and this is a simplification of Donella Meadows' work. So they can range from shallow adjustments, such as changes to incentives, processes, information flows, to deeper shifts around narratives, norms, or underlying mindsets. Evidently, deeper leverage points are typically harder to shift, but they are most powerful. So why do leverage points matter? They matter because they help teams focus efforts where they have the greatest system level effect. They help surface opportunities where the system is already moving or even might be stuck. And they support adaptive MEL by showing where your actions are actually touching the key pressure points, the key bottlenecks as well. And as I said, you can link them back to your domains of change, which tell you what needs to shift to identify how and where to intervene. When do we use domains of change? While we typically recommend that you use them after you have some understanding of the system. So for instance, you could consider doing a light systems mapping before identifying your domains of change, just because it's important to have an idea, a sense of the system's dynamics, bottlenecks, and feedback loops. And they are useful before you're building your system's informed theory of change, because they help you prioritize the interventions and activities that are going to be better placed to have a better and a higher impact on your system. So let's talk about how that could have worked in the Kenya drylands example. So as you know, the team used the domains of change to understand what needed to shift in the system. So for instance, let's think about power and institutions for this case study. So looking at who has legitimacy, who has voice, and who has decision-making authority in water governance. A leverage point, for instance, could be changing who participates in water governance and opening these formal roles to women and youth. And that could be a mid-leverage point around rules and structures because it will have strong systems influence. And then tying it back together to the early signals of change, some clues that might tell you that change is happening could be women speaking up in meetings, procedural adjustments in water management, and emerging collaboration between women's groups and youth. Again, with leverage points, we're talking about how a small change can have wider ripple effects across multiple domains and across your system. And we're going to be practicing today how to spot these domains of change in this larger systems work. I won't go into much detail around these prompts because we will leave them here for you to look at during the exercise. But just to say that these prompts, and these are not exhaustive, and we have others on the guidance, might help you look for places where your system is already signaling an opportunity. For instance, there could be repeating patterns or practices or bottlenecks where some things are shifting or momentum is building, or there might be some blockages or choke points that you might need to unlock to have the biggest shifts. So we encourage you when you're thinking about leverage points to also think about what small change could ripple outwards across multiple domains. What norms, mindsets, or beliefs hold the status quo in place. We've heard wonderful examples, for instance, around mindsets and pastoralism. Where is energy or momentum already building that you can build on? What are the structural barriers or gaps that make collaboration or coordination difficult? And importantly, what is realistic for us and our allies to actually influence, right? So let's go back, and this takes us back to the spheres of control, influence, and interest, right? So you would be trying to identify leverage points that you can control or that you can influence, not necessarily that are in your sphere of interest, because those would be out of reach. Very, very, very quickly, this is, again, the simplified version of the leverage points adapted from Daniela Meadows' work. And I've already mentioned a little bit about this, but we talk about practices and processes as being in the spectrum, the most shallow leverage points, and this can be small practical adjustments that improve how people behave, coordinate, or access resources. And examples are coordination tools, routines, training formats, adjustments to resource flows, or feedback loops. And you would use them when you need quick wins, and these are low-risk experiments to get you early traction. Then we have rules and structures, which we call them mid-leverage points. And these are changes to how decisions are made, who participates, how information flows, and that can shift whole patterns of behavior. And just an example, when committees change how they include people, or when data flows earlier in the system, you actually start getting different outcomes. And then we have mindsets and power, which are the deepest leverage points. So these are about narratives, legitimacy, identity, culture, and those invisible stories that people operate from. So the key message is that leverage points exist at different depths. You don't need many. You don't need to tackle all the spectrum. You just need to find the right ones in your system and also be realistic about what you can achieve. And then importantly, when you use them in your own initiatives, things will inevitably look different. And that is the point. Leverage points emerge from your system, your actors, your power dynamics, your constraints, your relationships. And in some systems, power might be ripe for change. In others, relationships might be the most strategic entry point. And in others, rules or incentives might be the easiest levers to pull. We also call them levers as well. So leverage points are to be discovered by your through the work in your system. And just a last note saying that you might notice that some of the leverage points categories sound similar to the domains of change in terms of power, institutions, mindsets, and that is expected. Again, they are looking at the same system, but from different angles. Domains of change help us name what needs to shift for our strategic intent to become real, ideally, again, oversimplification. And your leverage points help us identify where a small, well-placed, targeted intervention could actually help trigger that shift. Okay, and together they form the bridge from insight to action. But now we want to give you some time to practice this in groups. So we are going to ask you to first, we have a very short reading about the Kenya case study that might help you get an idea of how things were happening in that case study and just reflect about what stands out to you about how the system behaves. Then we're going to ask you to brainstorm 4 to 6 possible leverage points. You can use the spotting prompts that we included, here to spot them. Don't worry about being right. Just notice what feels small but meaningful. And then as a group, we'll ask you to sort them into the depth categories, going from practices and processes to mindsets and power. And then please discuss where did you find most of your leverage points clustering, and are there any surprising gaps or insights? For this group exercise, again, we have this text around the Kenya drylands case. Please take a couple minutes to read this. And then we will be working on Google Slides this time. We are testing different types of tech. So we want to see how this, if this works or not for this type of exercise and group activity. So my colleague Fede will share the slide deck with you all that you can edit. You can add the brainstormed leverage points here, and then you can just move them and put them in this category buckets. And if someone really likes an idea for a leverage point, they feel that it's especially promising, you can put a heart on it. Okay, so and then I can present this last bit. But please Faye, if you want to say anything about the groups or the Google Slides that you're sharing, please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Andrea. So I shared in the chat the link, and I'm going to reshare it for ease of reference. You will see that the first 2 slides, there is the explanation, and then for the next ones, that would be an assigned number of the breakout room. Please look at the breakout room number of your room and go directly to that slide, please. A note also that as new colleagues join us and some of needed to go, you will see maybe new faces, or the group will be a little bit smaller, but we really hope that their conversation will be very engaging. So I'm going to open the breakout room. Andrea set up 10 minutes. I hope that's okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
10 to 12 minutes, I think we have for this exercise.
Okay.
Okay.
Amazing. Thank you.
Hey, welcome back, everyone. We know these are very difficult things to work through in 12 minutes. But we hope that you did have an interesting conversation, that you started to engage with some of these leverage points, and that it's piqued your interest for those who are new to it. Andrea, I'm wondering if you want to keep going. I'm not sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have space for perhaps a comment if anyone wants to jump in, or any reflections are welcome on the chat as well.
Any brave souls that want to jump in?
I will talk. As you guys can tell, I talk a lot. Like even my own mom is tired. When your own mom is tired, that's how you know you've crossed the line. So one thing that one of my team member, breakout roommate, shout out, and I really enjoyed, by the way, the fact that we were back in the same breakout room. We didn't have to take up town to like get to know each other. I was like, I know these people. But one of the things that Ruslan mentioned was as a leverage point, which I'm like, that is really good, is how areas or potentials for transferring ownership of the project to the community that you're benefiting. So you use that leverage point to basically have literally a bit of all the three leveragey points and ensure sustainability when you're not there or the funding stops. So I think that was a really, really good leverage point. And I really like framing it in terms of fine, you brought something to them, but now it is their thing. And then how does that continue? So yeah.
Hey, and Kafayat, sorry
Yeah,
if I'm saying it wrong.
yeah, thank you. So in my group 16, we considered, I think, more or less small shifts that could, what I say, cause ripple effect throughout the system. And then we considered redirecting or adjusting the resource flow, to the marginalized, including women, more women and youth. And then we also considered adjusting or including into training the issues of sustainability and innovation. And this would be centered around not just the youth. Youth are very agile in terms of innovation, but we also need the local knowledge that is held by, older people in the communities who have used age-old practices in farming and the likes. And then we also talked about the inclusion of more women, youth, and the marginalized into in decision-making processes in that could, and also in stewardship. That could also be to strategic shift in terms of water access. Who has water, access to water or not? That could help shift that pendulum a bit. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing. Andrea, I might hand over to you for the next step.
Yeah, since we just have a couple minutes left, we've been getting some questions as well around how do we know that these are the right leverage points that we are choosing. Again, we said you can go back to your domains of change that might help you with framing them. You might just have to experiment and see where you can start. But let me just the plan wasn't to go over this, but you will have this in the slides that we shared. And this is just a very nice tool that might help you prioritize your leverage points. So for example, you all brainstormed a series of leverage points. You would be able to drop them here and then classify them between how easy or hard it might be to implement it, and does it have low impact or the potential for high impact. And of course, we would recommend that you would start focusing on the ones on the upper left quadrant. Okay, so you will have this as a resource for the ones that you might want to work on this prioritization of leverage points. But we are at time, and so the last thing that we will ask you is to please drop your questions for the next session, the Ask Me Anything session. We are gathering questions that you've been dropping during the session on the chat. But if you have any other questions, you can please join this Mentimeter and drop them there, and we will use them for the next session. Again, so next session we will be covering the spiral of systems change. We will be covering systems informed theories of change, and we will have an example of how to work with the strategic intent and domains of change at the portfolio level. So shifting away a bit from the more micro example of the Kenya case study and going into the portfolio view. So we're excited about this last session, and as always, we welcome your feedback. You know, we'd love to know if this is resonating and things that we can improve. We please email us, drop it in the chat. We're here and trying to. We really do take feedback to heart and try to incorporate that in the subsequent sessions. So thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you too.
Of course.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you so
Thank you so
much.
much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye bye. Goodbye.